Jamie Wax joins us with more on the iconic actor. All right, so Jamie, Gene Wilder was widely regarded as one of America's foremost comic actors. What made him so unique?
I think there was a deep sadness to everything that he did. He was like this man-child with these big sad eyes, and he made you laugh, but he made you feel something deeply emotional. And what's interesting, if you look at his life, he was born Jerome Silberman in 1933. And his mother was very, very ill with heart disease. In fact, the idea was that she could go at any time. And he said that in his childhood, he was always told to be the funny one and to make his mother laugh and to keep it light. So I actually think in his comedy, there was a sadness and there was a drive to sort of save his mother's life that began this performer in him.
That's an enormous burden to place on a child. You can sort of see, though, how that would propel him then into the work that we have seen. Let's talk about also, though, just off screen as well. There's a legacy there beyond just the entertainment, which I do want to talk about, but it's important to note that when it comes to the issue of ovarian cancer, we were talking off camera, he lost his mother ultimately. He lost his mother.
I mean, this is a woman who suffered his entire life with her. She was suffering from severe heart disease. She lived into his 20s, and he ended up losing her to ovarian cancer. Years later, in 1982, on the set of Hanky Panky, he meets Gilda Radner. They famously just were deeply, deeply in love. And 7 years later, he loses her to ovarian cancer. At the time, it's hard to remember that in the 80s, when we talked about cancer among women, we talked about breast cancer if we talked about it at all. The fact that this had such a genetic predisposition, that there was a need for testing, he testified before Congress. He co-founded Gilda's House, which still helps cancer patients and the families and friends of people struggling with cancer. He has a tremendous legacy that even goes, I mean, you could trace it back to the HPV vaccine and the fact that we have all of this pathology for different kinds of cancer, like ovarian cancer, to the fact that he stood up and said the words in front of Congress and the world.
Yeah, not a lot of people were talking about such things at that time. I want to go back to his body of work and his collaboration with Mel Brooks in particular. Tell me about why that relationship clicked so well.
3 films. I mean, he did the play Mother Courage and Her Children here in New York with Anne Bancroft, and Mel Brooks was her boyfriend at the time, eventually her husband. I think they hit it off and had completely different ideas about comedy. It's why they only did 3 movies together. We think of them as famous collaborators, and yet they only did 3 films together. They did The Producers, which got both of them, won Mel Brooks an Oscar for screenplay, and got Gene Wilder nominated for his first of 2 Oscars as Leo Bloom. And then in 1974, they had their banner year and did Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, which Wilder really came up with the idea for. They collaborated on the screenplay, and both ended up nominated for an Oscar for that screenplay.
They seem to know each other's strengths and play to those.
Except that they never did another film. And what Gene Wilder has said about that is that Mel Brooks liked the slapstick fall-down comedy, and he liked a gentler, more romantic comedy. And so they chose never to work together. They stayed friends. There was no real falling out, apparently, but they didn't keep working together in their career.
What about his collaboration with Richard Pryor? Tell us about that.
The Silver Streak began it. That was a 4-picture collaboration. It's funny to think he did more pictures with Richard Pryor than he did with Mel Brooks.
Yeah, people wouldn't think that necessarily.
But that started a great partnership. They went on to do 3 other films, Stir Crazy probably the most prominent of them, directed by Sidney Poitier. And that was, again, a mixing of styles you never would have imagined. But it's really one of the things that is a silver lining when you lose someone who's important to all of us as a performer like this, is now we all want to go back and watch those movies. The first thing I did in a meeting I was in when I heard it was, we all started watching on someone's laptop Young Frankenstein. You all started watching Willy Wonka here, which Willy Wonka was a tremendous flop in 1971.
See, I think people don't realize that, because for people of my generation, you look at this and we don't know the Johnny Depp, like there is no Johnny Depp Willy Wonka. You know, there is only one Willy Wonka here. And so when you think about Gene Wilder, for us, we can't help but think, okay, this is the person that we remember from our childhood that brought us that joy and that lightness. And so it's interesting to hear, Jamie, your insights into his life and what it was that really formed him in those early years.
I think so, and you know, he basically retired from the business after 1991. We haven't seen him in anything in a long time, although his performances and his films are so classic, we see them come up so often, it feels like it's more than that. But when you look at how happily he's been retired, I think the last time we really heard from Gene Wilder was when Charlie and the Chocolate Factory came out. He came out saying it was needless to remake the film. I think he probably enjoyed his retirement. And maybe he enjoyed a little bit of being released from that pressure he felt since he was a child to be the funny one.
Yeah, incredible talent. All right, Jamie Wax, thank you so much.
Thanks, Elaine.